I'm Caleb Dobbins. I'm Chief Engineer for Manchester Department of Public Works. And again, tonight we're holding a public meeting relative to the rehabilitation. Hoyle Tanner is our consultants for this project. There's a number of folks here that are from the consultants, so hopefully if you folks have questions, concerns, suggestions, we're going to take all those suggestions down and be able to answer hopefully any questions that you may have relative to the project in itself. So this project is a rehabilitation of the eastbound bridge plus the ramp that goes down to Canal Street. It is not the westbound. That will be the next bridge that comes up along. This one was chosen first because it's on what's called the red list. We'll get into that a little bit here as the presentation goes along. I will say that although it is adjacent to the work that will be going on at Exit 6 and Exit 7 that the state will be doing at the Amoskeag Rotary, these projects are very much separate, so we're trying to get at least this bridge done and out of the way before those projects come along. So just to kind of get y'all heads wrapped around what's going on. So I'd like to introduce now Sean James from Hoyle Tanner. He's the project engineer, project manager on this for this job, and he'll kind of go through some of the slides. Again, if you have questions, you can. Sean, would you like to ask the questions, or do you want to save them till the end, or how would you like to handle that?
Yeah, just jump right in.
Okay, so yeah, that way we won't forget them as we're going along here. So again, I'm going to pass it off to him. If you have any questions, I'll be also taking those as well as the folks from Hoyle Tanner. I don't know, Sean, if you want the folks from Hoyle Tanner to introduce themselves, just so that everyone in the maybe has a feeling if one of them happens to provide an answer relative to one of the questions.
Sure.
So I'm Ed Weingartner. I'm a senior bridge engineer with Hoyle Tanner working on this project.
Nicole Davis. I'm the Creative and Development Director. I handle public outreach for the firm.
And I'm Kimberly Peace. I'm the environmental coordinator, and I handle the NEPA and permitting aspects of the project.
Thank you. No, we're not serving coffee.
Okay. All right, thanks everyone. Appreciate you coming out on not a great night. I guess it could have been worse. Could have been snow, right? With snow, we wouldn't be having it tonight. So thanks, Caleb, for the introduction. And again, if you have questions, the purpose of this is to provide some information on the project and get public feedback. So that's why we're here. So tonight, there's two public meetings generally we have for these projects. We had the first, which was the local concerns. That was a couple of years ago. And that meeting was not as well attended, so I'm glad to see everyone here tonight. We've gone back, we took some of the public input we did get, and now we have a couple alternatives to present. So for tonight, I'm going to just talk briefly about our firm, just so you know who we are. Go through a little bit of the purpose and need of the project, some funding, work we've done to date. Then really the main part is the alternatives, maintenance of traffic, which is the question everyone wants to know about, and then get input, concerns, and questions at the end. So I've got a PowerPoint presentation. Again, jump in, or we can hit them at the end, and then we'll stick around to answer one-on-one questions. Yes, sir.
Does the material you have prepared cover any of the concerns that were raised in the meeting several years ago?
It does.
Great.
Yep. All right, so Hoyle Tanner Associates, we're a New Hampshire-based engineering firm. Our office we can walk to right down here in the mill yard. We've worked with the city on projects for 30 years, over 30 years, including this bridge. We did some seismic retrofit back in 1998 on it. This is a municipally managed project, so it's state and federally funded, but it's managed through the city, and we've done over 100 of those. And we do have some project partners on this for paint evaluation, KTA Tater, InfoSense did deck testing, and DUSET survey on our survey. So a little bit on the location. Hopefully everyone's familiar with it, and we're going to switch around a couple names. So I'm going to start with DOT. So DOT calls it Salmon Street. There's westbound. I'll use the westbound bridge is one bridge. It really, you think of this as the Amoskeag Bridge. For DOT's purposes, they count it as three. So westbound is one bridge, as Caleb said, that's a future project. We're not talking about that tonight. Eastbound we are, so eastbound and continues through, and then there's a ramp, which has another name. So we've got Salmon Street westbound, eastbound, and then Camp Street for the ramp. Kind of orientation 2 is exit 6 on I-293. For our purposes, we're just going to call it Amoskeag eastbound in the ramp tonight. So I put purpose and need. This is really from a federal perspective, and there are federal dollars involved. This really sets the tone for what we're trying to do. And so I'm not going to read every word, but essentially we're trying to extend the life of the bridge. And the need for it is based on the condition. And I'll show some pictures of that and explain that. But that's really the purpose. It's a very important bridge, sees a lot of traffic, critical to the city, and it needs to be maintained. A little bit on the bridge. So constructed in 1970, so pushing 50 years now. It's a steel girder bridge, over 1,000 feet long. And this, again, this is just the eastbound bridge itself. I'm going to skip through a little bit of this, but a couple things I wanted to point out is for the width, and I'll show that on the next slide, it's fairly narrow. We have two 14-foot travel lanes, so that comes into some of the comments we received earlier. It's been rehabilitated at least 4 times, and fairly constantly. It's become a maintenance issue for the city. If you've driven that area, you're going to see a lot of times they're out there trying to patch up the pavement, and there's a lot of problems with the decks that has led to that. One thing that was really interesting, we started looking at this, and it's important to how we're going to treat traffic control. So 1997, we had 12,500 vehicles a day. So DOT provides these numbers and counts up the vehicles. 2021, again, just after COVID, 12,600. So in that period of time, it's essentially seeing the same amount of traffic. So I mentioned this is a typical section if you kind of like slice through the bridge, and I don't expect you to be able to read the numbers, but a couple of key numbers. Out to out, it's about 34 feet wide, and then the roadway between curb to curb is only 28 feet wide. So when we're looking at a typical roadway section, lanes are typically 12 feet. That only leaves us 2 feet for a shoulder. The ramp, same year of construction. This is 6 single-span bridges, cast-in-place deck. And this is the part you can see more of as you drive by it. This has a little bit different. This is a single 22-foot wide lane, so a little bit narrower than the main bridge. And again, that has undergone some rehabilitations as well. So for the need for the project, on the right here is the federal definition. So every 2 years, the state goes out and inspects the bridges. Some bridges will go out every year. And they use basically a 0 to 9 scale. So 9's brand new, 0 is closed. And so this bridge falls in, depending on the component, it's either a 4 or 5. So what does that mean? That means, as Caleb mentioned, that puts it on the red list. And what does that mean? It basically, it's kind of a point where you start to say, hey, this needs some work. It's in enough of a condition. There's enough deterioration where we need to start thinking seriously about doing some work on it. The bridge is safe. It's not posted. There's no issues as far as structurally or any issues along that. But this is more just like a concern with maintenance. So funding is being funded through the New Hampshire DOT Municipal Bridge Aid Program, which is a really good program. They provide 80% of the funding for the project. In this case, it's coming through that 80% either state or federal, depending on the phase of it. And then the remaining 20% is a local share. So it's a 3-phase process. We have engineering study, preliminary plans, and final plans. Right now we're in the preliminary plans, kind of that middle part of the process. And moving ahead a little bit towards next year, so we're looking to put this out to bid next September, and then construction would happen between 2025 and 2026. Okay, so get into a little bit of the inspection findings. If you have any hard questions, Ed is here for these. Ed took most of these pictures and did the inspection. But But what we have is, really what you see, and is the deck condition is causing a lot of problems. So you're getting potholes. This is an aerial view. You can see the patches that the city's been doing. And what's happening is you have a concrete deck with a membrane and then pavement. Water's getting under the membrane, picking it up. You get these potholes, and the city's been doing a good job. It's been a lot of work, but you can see the amount of patching that's happening there. Continue looking around the bridge. The bases are starting to, the concrete's deteriorating along the curb line at different areas. This is at the joints, and also some issues with the drains. So I mentioned that water. So we put a lot of salt down in New Hampshire. We need to keep the road safe. That salt, the idea is that the pavement and the membrane is going to stop that from getting to the deck. In this case, it hasn't. And this is the view underneath. So you're looking up underneath the bridge. And what you're seeing is efflorescence, which is basically the water taking some of the chemicals through the concrete through. So you see this kind of white lateness here. And then eventually the reinforcing expands and some of the concrete pops off. So what we know is that salt has made its way all the way through the deck. On the superstructure, generally in pretty good shape. There are some areas like this that are not, so we have some heavy rusting here on the lower flanges. This is looking down through the steel beams. And this is an area at a joint. So anytime we have a joint, we try to avoid those, but we need them on a longer bridge. No matter what you do, eventually they're going to leak. It's just how long before they leak. They start to do this, that salt-laden water comes down, and then this is what happens to your steel. So we've got a little bit of paint system failure, and then the corrosion. We keep working our way down. This is the substructure, so this is what supports. So we get the superstructure, which is the steel. Substructure is supporting it. And same sort of issues, concrete spalling, cracking. And so this is a spall here where the steel expands, pops the concrete off. And we also have spalls here and throughout all the piers. And then again, just more pictures of the same, but that's what you're seeing here. So this is the pier. And in this location, you've got the salt water coming down through, rusted the steel, popped off the concrete. So these are items that lead it to, we talked about that rating system, these lead it down to the 4. You start having items like this, concrete popping off, decks in poor condition. So what do we do about it? Well, the first part of the process is, and a lot of this goes to some of the federal standards we have to follow. You look at a couple alternatives. The first is always no build. What if we did nothing? Well, if we don't do anything, this is just going to continue to deteriorate, and it'll get to the point where we're not really able to save it. So that wasn't a good option. So we looked at 2 alternatives, and I'll go through in a little more detail. A, we could repair it. And as I mentioned, in 1998, we repaired the deck already. So 1998, took the pavement, the membrane off, repaired all the concrete on the decks. And now, we're 20-something years later, 25 years later, so we're having more problems. The second alternative we looked at was replacing the deck. So what does that mean? That means basically keeping the steel, everything above it gets replaced. So the guardrail, the curb, the pavement, all that gets replaced. And following industry practices, what New Hampshire DOT looks to is in their bridge program recommended investment strategy, they look for deck replacement at 60 years. So I mentioned we're 1970, the bridge was built, so we're about 53 years, so we're about ready for deck replacement. But we do want to make sure that we look at all the alternatives. So deck repair, starting kind of from top to bottom, so we take off the pavement, the membrane, expansion joints, and then repair all that deteriorated concrete. That would be different methods to do that, but potentially a lot of like jackhammer work, taking it out, we put new concrete back. There would also be, some of those would be partial depth, or some would be full depth. They would go all the way through in some cases, depending on how bad the concrete is. We'd have substructure repairs, that's to the piers, and steel painting. So the advantages here, lower project cost, shorter construction duration. However, you're basically repairing on top of a 50-year-old deck that we know has salt going through it. And
Sean, how thick is that concrete deck?
7 inches.
7, thank you.
Yeah. So, yeah, 7-inch deck, and probably if we did a repair, we'd be back here in 10 or 15 years. So one thing we know is this is going to be inconvenient for people traveling, the traveling public. We'll get to traffic control in a couple slides. So we look at, well, we can do something now, but we'll be back in 15 years. Whereas we'll look at the second alternative. So this is repair. The second's replacement. So that's complete removal. That's basically coming in, a lot of heavy equipment, and take that entire deck out, down to the steel. Put a new deck in, so we'd have new deck, new joints, railing, waterproof membrane, and pavement. And the new concrete materials that we use, we also have a lot of additives in them, so they would last longer. We're also looking at using the steel that's in there now, that was used in the 70s, is basically bare reinforcing steel. Today, we have different versions, but one thing we're looking at is maybe a stainless steel deck. So if you have concrete with stainless steel, that can last up to 100 years. So I won't have to worry about that. That'll be someone else's problem to deal with. But again, we're looking at 10 or 15 years if we come back with repairs, or stainless or better. So this is really where we looked at, and I put 60 to 100 years. Who knows? It's kind of in that time frame. So higher construction cost on this and longer duration. So we looked at both these alternatives, and they are based on, as I mentioned, purpose and need, public input, city requirements. Again, city owns this bridge, and is decided to maintain it. So alternative D, the deck replacement, is the recommended alternative right now, so that it best meets that purpose and need, giving low maintenance, long-term replacement for the city, and it provides a lower life cycle cost.
Can you go back one slide?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good. Okay.
You said that B was more expensive. Can you compare the costs?
Yes, this is where Ed's going to help me. So I don't know if we did, I know the deck, the recommended alternatives in the $12 million range. And the repairs would probably be, what do you think, more like 8?
Yeah, I don't remember the number off the top of my head, but it was not substantially less.
So it's not even twice as much.
I don't recall paying it.
Okay.
Right. And part of that is, some of the work, regardless of what you do, is the same. You have to deal with traffic control, we have to do all the concrete repair, we have to paint the steel. That's the same in all of those. It's just really kind of what you do there. Yeah, bridge joints, exactly. So again, we weighed all that, and we ended up with the deck replacement alternative. So one question I got earlier was the initial feedback. What did we get for initial feedback? Well, again, it was fairly limited, but we did get a couple of concerns. One was a complete streets kind of view. So this bridge is 28 feet wide, so could we widen the bridge? We looked at that in both alternatives, and the short answer was no. And what was controlling was the steel. So when they designed this steel back in the 70s, things have changed. In the 70s, material costs were much higher, kind of relative to labor, so they really optimized the steel in this. And there's not a lot of excess capacity. It's completely safe, it carries the loads, but when we talk about adding more width to bring in a bicycle lane or another sidewalk, it doesn't have the capacity. And if you get into strengthening that, the way, we can talk details later, but a lot of the construction really doesn't lend itself to that. So that was one feedback, excuse me, got earlier. So we did look at it, we did try to widen it, we're unable to do that. So for maintenance of traffic, so this is basically our way of saying what do we do with traffic during construction. So the plan is for the eastbound bridge and the off-ramp to be closed during construction. Completely closed, because we talked about we're going to take the entire deck off this bridge. And so give the contractor enough room and allow them to do the work, we're going to close the bridge. What do we do with traffic? We're going to take the westbound traffic and we're going to make one lane in each direction. And how do we know it works? Well, we did it in 1998. So we basically have about the same amount of traffic. We're going to use the same traffic pattern. And as Caleb mentioned, this won't have any effect on the Amoskeag, so that comes later. So anything we do with traffic isn't affected by that project. We'll also look for smart work zone signage on I-293. So technically 293 through here is the turnpikes. So we've had some initial conversations with them. And smart work zone is basically to allow people ahead of time to know what's going on. So hey, there's some construction ahead. You may want to take Bridge Street or Grand Street or take another, well, we wouldn't take Bridge Street, but maybe take Grand Street as a different exit. Take a different route perhaps. So we're looking at that. We're still working through, as I mentioned, we're kind of in that middle part of the project. So in final design, we'll really get into some of the details. But right now, what we're thinking is full closure for one season. So that would be 23, 24, 25 would be fully closed. And then the following year, partial close. We may be able to open a lane at that point in 2025. So the first year, we're thinking what they would do is come in and replace the deck on the long bridge, then come back the next year, and then we could put one lane of traffic on it while they paint the steel. And then the second year, maybe they would work on the deck replacement on the ramp, and then the rest of the painting. So we're going to put requirements in place as far as how long the contractor has. There's environmental restrictions, there's time of year restrictions, there's traffic that we have to deal with. So they may or may not do it that way. We try to give them, as much flexibility as they can. We don't want to dictate the means and methods of exactly how they do it, but we're going to lay out what they have to work with.
So are you thinking the repairs to the ramp will be equally as extensive as to the bridge?
Yes. Yeah. So the ramp portion would be the same. That would be a full deck replacement, new joints, and then substructure repairs as well. And I mentioned some of the things we need to work around. So there's environmental permitting, which Kimberly helps us out with, and it basically keeps us where we need to be. Also, the railroad goes under here, so we've done some initial outreach to them to coordinate with them. Also, there's access. Access down to the river is through private property, so we started to do a little bit of outreach with them as well. So with that, so just to summarize, the last slides, questions, comments. Caleb's and my information up here if anyone has any questions. But just to kind of summarize what we're looking to do. So for the eastbound bridge and ramps, we're looking at a 2-season project with full closure, traffic diversion, and then about a $12 million project to, again, when we're done, we'll have a new deck, repainted, the substructure will be in good shape, and the bridge will be in good condition for quite a number of years. So I'll put this up. Just kind of a last slide, if anyone has questions we can point to specifically. So, yes ma'am.
In 1998, when you had all of the traffic only using one bridge, were there major delays in the area, or did things move kind of smoothly? Like, what was that like, and what would we expect this time around?
Yeah, probably similar. So what we would do prior to construction is we put some signs up to let people know, that traffic's coming, new change in pattern, and we'll also do some outreach on social media to let people know. So try to let as many people know. What we'd like to do is some people can divert or go to another, go another way instead of taking the bridge. So that will happen a little bit. The first week or so, yes, there were backups for sure. People that didn't see or didn't get the notice that it was going to happen still came to the bridge. We had some backups until they maybe went a different way. Once that was through, it functioned pretty well. There's certainly certain times of the day in the early morning and afternoon when people, we're kind of rush hour. It's interesting now that, I think we had the traffic counts. It's just timing on when those two times, they're very close. And, we've had COVID, so that's changed a lot of people's patterns as far as driving. So I guess to answer your question, initially I would expect there would be some backups as people get used to it, and then it should kind of work its way out. It seemed to function pretty well last time.
And I can actually answer a little bit on that one. So this past summer, we actually paved Salmon Street from the bridge out back to Elm. During that, we were using Canal kind of as a detour. We did find issues clearly in morning rush hour. It wasn't pretty, actually. But that was because we were forcing them down the canal instantly to a set of signals right there that then people who are having a hard time, if they want to make a left, they go back up to Elm. The advantage of here, being able to run it, and I haven't seen the exact things, but if we can get them back over to the lanes when they enter, when they come to Elm Street, at least you already have that left, the right, and the through. So now you got 3 lanes there's only one lane of traffic that gets to Elm Street anyway. So all you're really losing when you're doing this is that ramp that goes down to Canal Street. And as he said, the volume of that's 2,000 versus the 16,000. So only about 1 out of every 8 cars is using that ramp, and that's really what you're taking away from the traffic out here.
So might it be possible to use one bridge for non-motorized travel and one for motorized travel?
Unfortunately, when they take the deck off, they're going to take the whole deck off in order to match up all the structural steel and everything. I mean, you're going to get a much better product by simply by doing a concrete deck all in one section and not putting any joints or anything in that deck itself. So the quick answer to that is no.
Was your question direct construction or long term?
No, long term.
Long term.
Like, do we need 2 bridges for cars if we can't expand or put any facilities for people?
I don't know if that's really been looked at. Again, like I said, the challenge out here is certainly going to be rush hour, and as Sean had said, is this going to be a perfect solution in putting all the traffic over onto one bridge? Probably not. I think especially if you run rush hour, you're going to find issues backing up into that whole interchange on the turnpike, which is then going to force traffic down to Granite Street or down to further down the Queen City Bridge, and then that's going to then have basically a trickle-down effect that's within there. So the capacity that's there right now, it can handle what's out there now. I understand what you're saying in terms of it would be nice to have another infrastructure, a multimodal type of bridge. Unfortunately, where this is a rehabilitation versus a reconstruction, we're kind of limited as to what we're dealing with at this point in time.
Okay.
But we can look at traffic patterns and do a traffic study to understand if that's an option. Because when was the exit 5 opened up? I can't remember. What year? On the Granite?
On the Granite? Well, Granite was always there, it was just made into a diamond.
Right, but
Yeah.
we've now got the exits cleaned up, and I think I think one of the reasons you're probably seeing not a lot of the change in traffic between when you did the study in 97 versus when you did the study in 21 is because I can tell you right now, a lot of people avoid this bridge and go to the Granite Street ramps.
Right, because of that whole, and then how, depending on when the state comes through and they redo exit 6 and 7, you may see a shift in what that traffic is in terms of the people that are avoiding, as I say, the Amoskeag roulette out here right now in terms of trying
So it
to.
still seems worth evaluating if that's an option, because I can tell you the other day I was coming home and crossing the bridge and there was someone in a motorized wheelchair and it was a shit show.
Oh, yeah.
And we still need to provide some level of access for people that are going to be in a wheelchair, on a bike, or walking.
Right, we've been focusing on eastbound because that's the project. Westbound does have a sidewalk on it that is not impacted through this, so at least that part of it is addressed. So hold on, I think you were first, we'll get to everybody.
Thank you. I've lived in the neighborhood directly to the east of this bridge and have been commuting across the bridge twice a day for 26 years.
Okay.
If the construction is not scheduled to occur until 2025, 2026, we still have the winter of 2023 to 2024 and 2024 to 2025. The bridge is absolutely brutal in the winter with potholes, and I'm wondering, and this might be more of a question for Caleb, if there's a short-term plan to mitigate this in the next 2 years. The patchwork that occurs to the single potholes does not work, but the larger areas where more pavement is dug up and the larger patches tend to work better. it is really brutal, and I'm just wondering if there's a short-term kind of plan to address this in the next 2 winters before the deck gets replaced.
So, the quick answer to your question is there's a possibility of something like that. The problem is we can't just, because of the bridge joints and because of the structure of the dead weight of the bridge and stuff, we can't just simply come in and just like put an overlay over there. We would end up having to grind some of it, and then the fear is once you start grinding something, is that going to open up, and then you're going to end up chasing your tail all the way to the very end, where now all of a sudden you have to do something more than you might want to do, knowing that this was going to be coming down the line. I agree with you. I mean, and I can tell you that our operational folks would love it if we would have dropped the thing and repaid that entire thing this past year. But at this point, with knowing that this project was coming down the line, the option was not to go ahead and do that. So I do understand, and yeah, like I said, there's no group of people that would rather have that repaved than the folks that are out there have a Dodge car. So
Two more years in the your car.
I know, I hope to see this before I die.
You have a few more years.
Some days I don't know.
Sir?
Yeah, so I understand you said that, an expanded bridge deck just isn't supported based upon the current steel structure. Would it be possible to do something like a lightweight alternative that I've seen done in other places where they cantilever basically just a walkway, so it's not you're not extending the full deck, you have a cantilevered walkway that's made of something, you're not as strong as the bridge deck where you can drive cars across, but it provides pedestrians or cyclists basically a safe way to cross the Merrimack and the northern part of the city, because there really is no alternative short of going all the way down to Bridge Street.
Right, understood. And the answer is yes, we did look at it. As I mentioned, they really, the engineers in the 70s did a nice job of optimizing the steel. Unfortunately, it doesn't have a lot of reserve capacity. So whether we cantilever it outside, I know what you're talking about, something lighter that would just be more for bike and pedestrian. It just doesn't carry the load. The other issue we start to run into is if we do that on either side of the bridge here, then where do you go? So if we're out here, this traffic crossing that we would be trying to deal with, we certainly wouldn't probably take that down the ramp, right? So we're trying to get people across, and the easy answer is that we just don't simply have the capacity to do it. I wish we did. We looked pretty hard at it. I'd spent a lot of time trying to get it to work.
I think you would want to take it down the ramp, right? Because we just redid, what is that, Lower Street there?
Commercial.
Yeah, we just redid that.
And that eliminates the traffic crossing.
Yeah.
But I think the question might be, take it down the ramp or force it down the ramp.
Yeah.
Is maybe the distinction between those, right? So the cantilever options wouldn't be able to traverse the ramp to continue directly to Elm, is that what you're saying?
Right, well, yeah, maybe I'm clouding the issue. The simple answer is we don't have enough capacity to put any cantilever or widening on there.
You mentioned there was a sidewalk on the westbound.
On the westbound bridge.
Well, I'm a pedestrian, and I walk across this bridge, and I walk to Coolidge, and I walk down to Bridge Street. And as a pedestrian, you really get stuck, and this is not, the purpose of this meeting, I understand. You get stuck on the west side as a pedestrian trying to cross the exit 6 on-ramp, and then at the Front Street area. Those are two very dangerous spots to dodge as a pedestrian. So just in the future, when we're looking at the full totality of this interchange as a walker, the bridges does have a sidewalk, that's great, but then as a pedestrian, you get really stuck on the western part if you're walking that way to the west side, which we should be able to do safely.
And I might suggest that you take a look at, so DOT does have on their project pages some conceptual concepts of what exit 6 and exit 7 are gonna look like, and it's not gonna look at all like what you're looking at right now.
Yeah, it's been a
So,
while.
yeah, so, yeah.
Yeah, so I have a question. So you said that the lane widths on that are 12 feet each?
On the eastbound bridge, they're 12 feet for the lanes and then two 2-foot shoulders. So 28 feet wide.
Okay, so, I mean, I'm not a traffic person, engineer, whatever, that does this kind of stuff, but my understanding is 11 feet is adequate for buses and trucks to travel lanes. And then that extra foot could be added to the sidewalk, which I know it's on the other side, but it's not plowable in the winter. So people can't get across the bridge in the winter. Let me tell you about my neighbor who literally works on the other side of this bridge, lives over here on this side of the bridge, and has to go down 2.4 miles to hit a bridge that she can safely pedestrian across to get to her, one of her jobs. As a caregiver for someone who lives in the north end on the west side. So that seems like undue stress to put on lower economically situated individuals that really prioritizes higher economically situated individuals who have cars. So if we can add the sidewalk, take away from the cars, it will also slow the traffic for the cyclists who are also on the bridge at the same time, because cars tend to travel slower on those narrower lanes. I also wanted to suggest road signs and markings that say share the lane with the cyclists, because people are very aggressive coming off the highway here. And then suggest redoing the traffic counts there. In 2021, my partner was still telecommuting to work, and I think that was the case for a lot of people, so I suspect that the travel numbers might be higher.
Yeah.
And I just, a more accurate or more recent count, maybe not necessarily accurate, might be beneficial. And I'm coming at this as a disabled cyclist and walker in the city.
Understood. Can you just clarify the sidewalk comment? Are you talking about the eastbound? You're suggesting adding a sidewalk to the eastbound? Is that the suggestion?
Yes, I think
Okay.
that would be appropriate.
Why do we need 2 lanes on the eastbound? Because I drive that way all the time, and I do sometimes go down the Canal Street because I work right in the mill yard, but I don't really see, like, why do we need 2 lanes for cars on the bridge itself, right? Because all the cars, you're saying that like most of the traffic goes straight on Elm Street, and only like 2,000 cars go to Canal. So, like, couldn't you have 1 lane for cars, mostly directing you towards Elm Street with a crossing, like with you don't need a whole lane just to go to Canal Street, right? Only 2,000 cars go that way. I just don't understand why having 2 lanes there helps traffic if they all have to end up getting in 1 lane to get onto Elm Street.
Yeah, so expanding that train of thought as well, my observation, I traverse this bridge by car and bicycle multiple times a week, living in Ward 1 and getting on the highway, southbound often here. Coming back from my mother-in-law's on the west side, et cetera, rush hour times. It doesn't appear that throughput over the water, and specifically I mean just the water, so take the intersections out of play, that 2 lanes across the water is beneficial to the flow of traffic. It appears the constraints are from the interchanges on either side of the bridge, not the flow rate over the river itself. And so, being that we're talking about a project that locks this configuration in for 60 to 100 years, as a cyclist, I have severe concerns about not seeing this bridge get in a safer position for cyclists. It's also a death trap for us bikers, because when we do sense something happening behind us, the curbing is very high. And there is lots of things happening because of the potholes. Those cause drivers to react in erratic ways that put us in danger. And there is not an escape route for us. It's a very narrow sidewalk, and it's quite raised above the pavement level. So getting our bikes to jump up over that curb to some relatively increased safety onto that sidewalk requires an abnormal amount of agility.
And that's illegal, riding on the sidewalk.
And, yeah, well, I mean more like an accident's about to happen, right?
It's
Yeah.
admitting to a crime.
Yeah.
Yeah, so just to kind of answer the general questions or maybe more of a comment than an answer necessarily. So there are 2 lanes across the bridge, and they're intended to take you to 2 different destinations, right? So the northern lane continues along Elm Street, the southern lane continues down to Canal Street. And again, the traffic counts that I showed tonight are from New Hampshire DOT. We could look at potentially getting more of those. So, the option of potentially turning one of these lanes into, a bike or a shared use lane, you kind of be all or nothing. So I think what's being suggested is maybe the southern lane becomes non-vehicular and it just becomes pedestrian and bicyclist, more like a shared use lane down there. So all vehicular traffic would then be pushed onto Elm Street. And we'd have to look a little bit at that as to where, so this is the way I come in to work every day too. So I see this is not great when people are coming down the ramp and trying to merge in there, so.
Yeah.
So, Sean, I think also though, as you had said, that Camp Street, I actually had to look at the DOT thing, because I'm like, Camp Street, where's that? But that is what the state calls it. I can't find it anywhere else, but, I mean, if that ramp is 22 feet, and again, as they suggested, you'd say it's a 16-foot lane, then you got a 6-foot bike lane. But you'd have to narrow the bridge up to a single lane, quote unquote, over the water. And then it would widen out so that you could take a right to go down to Granite, or you could continue to go straight. It'd have to be looked at.
So bike riders crossing the river would go down the ramp.
Correct.
Drivers crossing the river could go either way.
Down the ramp first, right?
Could there be a crossing for actions?
Yeah.
At the fork though, so that cyclists could keep going?
Essentially, the bicyclist would have the right of way to go straight based on the right of way and the driving laws. There's nothing that tells them that they have to, because they are a vehicle and they're moving. So we couldn't just force them down the ramp if they're traveling on the roadway.
Right, so I guess those are things we could certainly look at. In any of those scenarios, you have to look at the full path. So if you have someone crossing the bridge and then suddenly they're gonna cross here, I don't think this is a safe, if I'm on a bicycle, I'm coming in this lane, I need to cross, then I need to get down here, and then this, I don't think is wide enough as it is now for bikes and vehicles.
But that's the problem, is a bicycle is a vehicle and has the right of way to use that whole stretch of road. There's no distinguishing a car versus a bicycle in the traffic code of New Hampshire.
Right.
Right, but based on that, then the bicyclist can just take the lane now.
Right, correct,
So there's no need for a bike lane.
correct.
Yeah, there's people will die.
Yeah.
But at the same time, he's also saying that motorist needs to know that they have to yield for the bicyclist.
Yeah, yeah.
But you're saying it's too unsafe for the bicyclist to be in the lane, but you're going to assume that the motorist is going to know that they have to yield.
Yeah,
think
I mean,
that's
it's
more
leading
dangerous.
different levels of cyclists, because
Yeah.
there are more expert level. You would fall into the expert level, you can ride anywhere, find your comfort level.
Yeah.
We would fall probably in that next level down, and then there's the true beginner level. So it depends, we can't design roadways assuming everybody is a master cyclist that is comfortable riding in that level of traffic, because we can't deny transportation to everybody based on that.
But that's how the design currently exists.
Well, oh God, yeah, the design today is for it.
Yes, sir.
I understand the concern about well, if we put the lane in here, where does it go? What about, paths? But the other thing you said earlier is they're redesigning exit 6. And so if that gets redesigned and is more pedestrian, cycle friendly, where do they go? The bridge is really the biggest hang-up. If there's no way for people to safely transit over the Merrimack River on the north end, it doesn't matter if they redesign the exit 6 rotary there, because there's still no way for the river crossing to happen.
Great point. We got a couple questions, and then we'll get to everybody, so.
Yeah, so in the
Okay.
theme of having to start somewhere, and, you know, this is the project that we're talking about now, it's closer than the Exit 6 revamp, which may or may not happen ever. Are you familiar with TAP Round 4 and the grant that was approved for the city of Manchester?
I'm familiar with the program, not
Okay.
that specific one, so.
So that targets specifically Canal, I believe it's Canal Street, which is where people would get off on. If there, for example, was a pedestrian, bicyclist, whatever, non-motorized lane on the south end of this bridge, and it went down to Canal Street, that would have, in business speak, a lot of synergy with the Canal Street revamp that's coming, where they're going to be implementing a road diet, along with a multi-use path that goes north-south for about a mile until it hits Granite Street. So that's something coming that's been approved, but the funding, we're still waiting on it here in Manchester. And that's something really important, I think, for this bridge project as well, because, again, we've got Exit 6 on the west, we've got TAP Round 4 happening on Canal Street on the right. This bridge needs to support multimodal transit, or else it's useless as a bridge for a significant portion of society. And this, to other people's point, is the only connection east-west until you go down to Bridge Street. And so it's
2.4 miles.
really important that we enable our bridges to serve the role that they exist for, which is to connect people to each other.
So the TAP grant you're mentioning, where is the multi-use path? I know it's conceptual.
Essentially along the rail line, but to the east of the rail line a little bit, I believe. So the city would be, I think you probably know a lot more about this.
Yeah, so right now, and he's right, it is in the 10-year plan, much like Exit 6 and 7 is in the 10-year plan. But it, conceptually wise, and it hasn't even had any preliminary or scoping, but the concept is to, as you mentioned, a road diet on Canal Street, which would basically narrow Canal Street to a single lane in each direction, and it would do a multi-use path on the west side of Canal. That would stretch basically from, Auburn, Elm Street all the way back down to, at this point, it would basically go roughly to the Amoskeag bridges. And then the idea at some point that would then connect to any rail trails that would end up going up to Concord. It's part of the big picture of being able to go from Salem to Lebanon.
Sure, okay. All right, thanks.
There's a lot of pieces missing in the middle.
I just wanted to reaffirm what you said about the whole Amoskeag redo, that we don't know where it stands. I feel like this is maybe a little bit of the chicken in front of the cart, and that's for you. And can we use this to leverage? I'm not about postponing work that needs to happen, but I am about heck, it's going to be a mess for years when they do that. Can't we sort of ride that coattail? That's just a comment. It's just, I just feel like they need to do something about that intersection, and I think many people in this room were disappointed that they put it off.
Right, it's a matter of how many different things can you have going on, how many contractors you can have working on top of each other, and just the physical room to work in that general area. So, again, this is a rehabilitation. A lot of really great comments here relative to what could happen out there. And I think it's important that first of all, our thing was to discuss today, the alternatives, which was right now the alternative of a rehab versus a deck replacement. And so just to get people on board, as to the scope of the work that was going to be happening. We can have internal discussions here within the city and focus groups and be able to have some of those discussions, because everything that you're talking about here relative to taking a lane or adding a bike lane or bringing it down to Canal Street is signs and striping. It's not, we're not gonna structurally change what we're doing out here for this work. And as Sean had said, this work won't even go out to bid until this time, probably next year. It wouldn't start for another 6 months after that. So you're saying before the first contractor's even on the ground, we got a year and a half. And again, it's a matter of the striping and then taking a closer look at exactly what the state's looking at for Exit 6.
And it's not just striping, it's creating safe multimodal lanes. Just striping is probably the worst thing that we've done as a city to put bike lanes in, because that, particularly where you've got the number of traffic and the amount of people going across that bridge, just striping is probably why I can bother with a bike lane, because people will ignore them.
Well, then I'm gonna look over towards the structural guy that's gonna be here. He's like, yeah, I'm not kidding. Because that bridge wasn't, so you're saying basically like do a raise.
No,
raise.
if we seriously are looking at maybe, you know, saying, okay, great, we've got the structural, we're being told that we have a constraint. The constraint is we can't build wider, we can't cantilever. What I'm saying is, I think that's great, but then we need to seriously look and do the focus groups to look at what would making that one travel lane be with a more protected bike lane. And it doesn't have to be raised. There's bollards. There's just different things that you're doing. What I'm saying is if we go in this and we say, yeah, we'll take care of y'all, we're just going to put a stripe in and put a bike lane, that's not going to fix the problem, and that's not going to create a safe bike lane that people can use.
Okay, well, and again, that's a discussion, because again, I'm skipping 3 steps ahead of, okay, how are we gonna maintain it? We already hearing it, we can't get out on the sidewalk. You know, if we send a sidewalk tractor down there to do it because it's only wide enough for a sidewalk tractor, what's gonna happen when they get to the exit 6, which hasn't been built yet?
Yes.
So there's a multitude of things that all go along with
However,
that.
that's what direction the communities are going into. So that's something that we have to look at anyway, as DPW, and how we're gonna maintain these lanes moving forward. We can't just say, well, we can't maintain them, so we can't do them. So it's something that, yes, we do have those challenges, and I think we have to use the time to really sit down and take people that are cycling and people that have studied this and have looked at this and really have serious conversations about what does that mean for when it snows? How do we deal with that? That can't stop our discussion because we probably have challenges clearing a sidewalk when it snows because we've added a bike lane.
I think this will get back in the back there.
I mean, I want to underscore, you know, everyone's emphasis on multimodal transportation and thinking holistically, but I am curious, in the deck replacement option, has any consideration been put into like heated road technology or any of that to reduce the use of salt and you know, make the roads safer during the winter?
We haven't, that's not really something that's been done pretty wide, not that it can't be done. I know Concord Hospital, for instance, heats their sidewalks, you know, partly, maybe more of a liability slant there, but also partly for environmental reasons. That was not something we looked at, I don't think. Ed, do you have any comments on that?
It's not technology that's readily used right now.
Right. So short answer is no. No, we haven't looked at that. Sir?
I was just going to take a step back and say, you know, as a taxpayer, I definitely support the idea of replacing the deck versus, you know, putting a Band-Aid on it. I think that's clearly the better solution, both structurally and economically, moving forward.
Same here. Agree.
Yeah, I just didn't want that part to get lost. And, you know, obviously there's a lot of concern here for what we're going to do on top of that deck and, you know, making sure that we build, you know, the sustainable city that we want to see moving forward. But yeah, I also would like to express my support for replacing the deck versus repairing and then going back and doing it again.
Okay, thank you, appreciate that.
Yeah, I'm also in favor of the replacement. If we're gonna do it, we're gonna do it right. So with respect to the steel beams, you can't put gussets in or anything to cantilever, a foot or foot and a half or whatever? No, does that weaken the steel on the bridge itself?
No, so as Sean mentioned, this bridge was designed with saving the utmost amount of steel that they could possibly save. Technically, right now, we are working on, we're analyzing the bridge for today's code, and we're having a hard time making it actually work. We know it works because it carries a load today, but by today's design standards, we're having a real challenge doing that. So we're trying to figure out ways that we can strengthen it. Right now, what we have to do right now to get it to meet today's design code. Well, why are we doing that? Well, one, because the trucking industry is not providing vehicles that are getting lighter. They're providing vehicles that are getting heavier. They're also finding ways to beat the legal system, adding axles, increasing their weights. So we're looking at this as a very long term, right? Like Sean said, 60 years to 100 years. You know, like a forever bridge for the city. Because the cost to replace this structure would be $100 million, if not more,
For the whole replacement or just?
for the whole thing. To replace the whole structure, to build something.
Meaning
that
just
could
the
sustain
eastbound and the down ramp?
All of it.
All.
We'd be well over $100 million, I suspect.
For both
And-
east and west?
Yep, all of it. If you wanted to really create a multimodal system here, you'd be doing that. The issue with cantilevering the structures is it's not just about what we can add to the superstructure, which really can't add anything to that. If you don't have enough space, you're now talking about having significant impacts to the river, building all new foundations to support some sort of multimodal system adjacent to the existing structure. So another great cost to the project area. So we've got, yes, sorry.
Just thinking about like trucks and things, and I mean, would having 1 lane versus 2 lanes reduce the amount of strain on the bridge because you can't have as many vehicles on it at the same time?
Likely, but I have to double check because now our current design codes factor all that in.
So my concern now is listening that we're trying to fit something in, we're trying to fit a square into a circle here. That's gonna last for 60 years, 70 years. It's problematic. I think we're shooting ourselves in the foot. I'd like to consider the replacement to what the future is. And the future is reducing traffic on Elm Street, getting vehicles off of Elm Street. And by doing that, you have other modes of transportation that we need to accommodate. And like Jim was saying, the lines just is not cutting it. We need something that people say, this is great, I feel safe. So, I don't know if the federal 80% does 100% reconstruction, or is it just for replacements?
So the answer is yes, it could cover it. So there's a process with any federal money, there's a process, right? And that's part of the process is us here tonight getting input. So we go back to that purpose and need. What's the purpose for the project? What's the need? If you could demonstrate through that you needed a replacement bridge, sure. The chances of getting $100 million to replace both these bridges, I think, is pretty slim. And if it did happen, it's at least 10 years away, at which point, the next step for this, not next year or 2 years, but 3, 5 years, is you're going to start downposting it. You're going to reduce, what can go across that. And
Okay, so half-ass it, then we'll get it done in 2 years. If you do it right, we'll get it done in 10 years.
yeah, wow. And replacing that is a massive project. There's
Yeah, no, I understand that, but we get stuck 60 years from now, 50 years from now, 40 years from now, they're gonna be reviewing this and they're gonna say, why the hell didn't they do the right thing back in 24?
We are. I mean, we're using all the tools at our disposal and engineering judgment to say we don't have a problem. Like I said, we are analyzing it with today's code. That today's code they did things differently back in the day. It doesn't mean it's not safe, because it certainly is. It doesn't mean it won't carry the load. It's just the code is a little bit different. It's certainly carrying the load. And certainly.
So with respect to abundance, you just patched the rebar that's sticking out right now. Is that just a patch job? And does that have a potential in 20 years to be popping off again? And a whole redo, would that be a new abutment?
Good question. So what we would do with one of those spalls that I showed earlier is you would go in and basically can chip away the bad concrete around it, clean the steel, and then we put, fancy term, call them pucks, that basically put a zinc anode in there that is going to help protect the steel in the long term so that we don't have that issue long term. So there's some technology we can use to make those repairs last longer, and that's what we would do in the substructure.
And we can all sit here tonight and say, yeah, it makes sense, we think we should widen it, we should make it, the Cadillac answer, okay? But the reality of it is you still need to get through all your environmental permitting, you still need to get through all your need assessment. And again, I'm not gonna speak for other folks, but they're gonna come and they're gonna look and say, Well, Manchester already has, and I understand the bicycle and the pedestrian infrastructure and everything, but they're gonna say, you already got 5 or 6 bridges crossing the river. Why is this one bridge so important in order to do all this? So you may not even be able to successfully get through the environmental permitting process in order to widen it. I mean, look at the I-93 Salem to Manchester. It took them 25, 30 years to get through that, and even that, I can assure you, because back in my day working for the DOT, we were this close to not getting it. So it all depends on, you know, so it's not a quick answer of, oh, just wait 10 years. It might be 30 years. It might be never. So,
Sir.
How much would it cost for a bridge just for bikes and pedestrians? A new bridge just for bikes and pedestrians? I thought that was for cars.
No, just for
So
a third bridge.
A third smaller bridge that's 6 feet wide, or however wide it takes for pedestrians, would also be 100 million?
no.
No,
How much would it cost?
I don't know off the top of my head.
Sean, do you know what the cost was for the proposed pedestrian bridge that they were talking about?
The one further down.
Leaving the mill yard?
Yeah, yeah, I would, to ballpark it, I'd say 20, 25 million,
25 million.
something like that.
And I think to your
20 to
point-
30, somewhere in there.
I mean,
It's
we're
not
not
5.
looking for Cadillac. We're looking for something to do better to support what we're seeing and support the amazing industry that we've built down in the mill yard that is already bringing more multimodal transportation to the city with just the nature of the people that are moving to our city. So if we're trying to figure out what is that middle ground that we can all be comfortable with and keep the city moving forward, because we know the Cadillac's probably not a reality. We're all realists.
Right, and that's what Nicole was kind of, talking about a little bit. There are discussions to have a pedestrian-only bridge be south of Bridge Street. It's, exact location to be determined,
But
but to
that still
support
pulls
those.
people out of this area with, what did you say, 2.3 miles? That still
2.4.
creates a barrier for people that want to
Sure.
cross the river higher up here.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's trying to figure out how do we balance that. Unfortunately, a lot of the meetings, and we ran into this with the, the Bill Grant and further down in the mill yard, where the group meetings happened before we had more cyclists and walkers in the city. So unfortunately, that was great data, those were great meetings, but it's kind of outdated. So now when we're bringing these things forward, we're seeing a resurgence, and it feels like we're probably hitting you guys hard, and we're probably trying to change things that were decided, but we're trying to reflect that things have changed in the time period since those last meetings, and we have to address that because we want to see our city moving toward the future and what we've added.
Understood.
So just thank you for putting this together, first of all, and thank you for taking our questions.
Sure.
When I look at the capacity, where the number is today, where it was years ago, everyone's already said it, the exchange, the Exit 6 exchange will be different in the future. So that is one deterrent that is limiting traffic now. Factor the growth that we're trying to bring to the mill yard into the downtown area, that should bring more traffic. But to Pat's point, we're trying to shoehorn something that'll never fit in the existing structure. So from my perspective, I don't know why we wouldn't consider replacing the bridge. And I understand there's a lot of money involved here, but I'd rather spend it now than come back in 20 years with something that didn't work, it didn't meet the needs of what we needed today, and then spend another $150 million in money 20 years from now. And I would also add that everything that we've said today is in our master plan for the city that we've recently done. Everything that we've talked about, multimodal, connecting downtown, everything is in there, and I don't think in what's proposed in these changes that addresses that at all. It's just my opinion.
Yes, sir.
Couple of questions, and first, thanks for the material, and it's never easy to be the guy in front of the audience, so thank you.
Well, these questions are coming.
I appreciate it very much. Hopefully it's the highlight of your week. Building on Pat's comment about trying to reduce vehicular traffic on Elm Street, this gentleman's comment about master plans and June's comments about promoting multimodal. I had a question sort of tangential to all that, which is we had a 2021 number which seems low for traffic volume. How does this lane structure support traffic projections? So, we talk about multimodal, we still know there's lots of car trips happening, right? We know things are changing. What are the best projections? And does this bridge support them over the lifetime of usability that you're projecting? Because all of that factors into, if not now, when, about how do we get safe multimodal transit at this crossing? Because that's sort of the nature of my concerns. If you're engineering us something that's going to last for another 60 to 100 years, and it doesn't solve our multimodal problem, where does that leave us in terms of opportunity to solve that, given the criticality, as Bryce points out, of what's happening to improve it at the exit 6 interchange and what's happening with TAP 4. So I know you probably won't have an answer about the traffic projections right now, but I think that's a really important contextual follow-up for decision making. And then the other question I had, the sidewalk width, I don't think that's getting plowed. I don't think your tractor fits there, and I haven't seen DPW out there with shovels. So we currently have I think, an important gap, even before we make construction decisions here about what's happening to serve people trying to transit that bridge.
So again, this is the westbound bridge, the eastbound bridge that we're talking about, sidewalks on the westbound bridge. I've actually already noted as to the potential that somebody had suggested of narrowing those lanes up to see if that sidewalk could get widened. But again, that's another project down that we haven't even cracked the book on that one yet.
Got it.
What about putting a big truck on that and then dropping the wing and just winging it right in? There's no barrier to plowing it with the wing of a truck.
I'd have to talk to our operations folks.
It'd be tricky. You don't want to hit the guardrail.
Don't send the rookie out to do that.
You want to jump back plowing, Peter? Just that bridge.
Just to address as far as the traffic projections, that's not something that we looked at. That's well beyond our scope. And we have talked about it internally with some of our traffic engineers, and it gets really complicated really fast. Not to say you can't do it, but what's baked into that are a lot of assumptions.
Sure.
So what you end up, we do have a traffic model for this, again, with certain assumptions into it, and widening that out. You start putting more people across. Where does the choke point become? Now is it at Elm Street at the signal? How much traffic can you get through there? Or maybe they come down Canal and then there's a light right there. So now do they start backing up? Things like that. It's an excellent point. And it's something we did think about, we have not really looked at. So.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
I don't want to reiterate too much of what's been said. I agree about the multimodal and anything we could do to, since this is going to last for 60 to 100 years, anything we could do to get it better than it is currently I'm all for. Right now, I feel like only the most suicidal bicyclists will actually go on there. I think all I'll add really is, since we're concerned about the ability to take the heavier traffic loading that current codes and projected codes might require, have we looked at the option of using lightweight concrete for the slab? Is it currently normal weight? Do we use that to safely unload and give that towards the left?
We have looked at that a little bit. Peter had asked what the deck thickness was. It is now at 7 inches. We're looking to go to 8, which is more of a standard. We did look at lightweight concrete. So normal concrete is about 150 pounds a cubic foot. Lightweight, depending, is maybe 120. So there's some savings there. It is a good point. I think that the reasons we may not look to go that way is a couple things. Durability. It's got a little bit less durability than the standard concrete, and also cost, depending on the aggregate you get and the time of year. And I wish I knew. I could figure out construction costs right now. They're all over the place. But depending on the aggregate you're using, it can be quite expensive. So it's a tool in the toolbox. If we did put a lightweight deck on, it's still not changing the answers that we've been giving tonight. And did I say anything incorrect, Ed? If I did, speak up.
It certainly would help. I don't recall to the extent, but as Sean mentioned, lightweight concrete is We use it when we absolutely have to. It's very temperamental, difficult to work with, and it would very much change how the bridge got constructed. You can't really pump it. Right now we'll be having pumps that'll pump concrete to make it more efficient, speed up the process, build with lightweight concrete because it's such a porous aggregate. If you pump it, you're forcing all the water and the cement into that aggregate and it no longer becomes lightweight. And it becomes very difficult to work in place. So there's a lot of reasons why we would choose prefer not to use lightweight concrete on this structure.
I understand.
It's a really good question.
Just want to give us some flexibility if we're talking about raising surface for a bike lane or for equipment lines.
Right, and once you start cantilevering something off that vinyl, and I'll let the structural engineer, but you're completely changing your moments that you're dealing with. Instead of everything being loaded down, now you have a torsional moment that you have on that outside beam, and I'm not thinking that those beams were ever considered to be designed for that type of loading. I mean, it's the issue that we run with, and on any of the bridges where everyone's like, oh, just widen it a little bit. Except for the way the beams and stuff were originally designed, it was for basically a uniform loading that's on that single beam.
I just comment back to your question about traffic. We can't predict that right now because we're still not, I don't believe we're still out of this post-COVID change in behaviors for traffic. But I take that bridge, or used to take that bridge every day when I commuted into the city, and I would always come well before 8 o'clock because I know it backed up from Canal all the way on to Amoskeag. And then in the evening, it backs up on the ramp coming onto the highway. And then leaving the city every night, 2 lanes backed up at least halfway up the bridge.
So I don't think it was like that in the 70s, which is why I don't think these numbers are right.
Yeah, so again, we're dealing with the numbers that we currently have, but we're not out of the post-COVID transition for sure. And then with whatever they're planning to do at 866 would really put a monkey wrench in how we predict what happens in the future.
Right,
I want to
but
say,
somebody's got an AI model, and so it may have a greater variance than we'd like in it, right? But there's experts in modeling that, and I think it ought to be modeled to see what those models say about the likelihood that this 2 lanes of capacity in the intersections is adequate. I don't think it changes the answer about alternative A versus B, but I think it's an important, and it's important for our long-term planning as a city.
and never in mind that the 2 lanes provides a lot more flexibility if you have to work on the bridge.
For sure.
If you choked it off down to, if you limit it to 1 lane, now you really have a problem when you have to do maintenance on the bridge.
But going to 1 lane, it doesn't change the fact that it's 28 feet wide. You can move that lane back and
We'd have
forth.
to account for that.
Right, but the feeling that I'm getting is we have a structure that we can replace in this project, and it's going to limit us to a certain amount. But there are so many unknowns and variables, like you were saying, with exit 6, that it's hard to predict what's going to happen on this bridge until we have a better understanding of what's going to go on at exit 6. Whether nothing happens or whether it's the cure to the problem. But it's not going to, we don't know that until it happens. And that choke point is just going to change from exit 6 to Elm Street. It's going to change to some other place in the city. We're never going to get rid of it. So I have a hard time going forward with a project until we understand what's going on around it in the next 5 to 10 years.
And just for a note, I don't know if it helps, but the possibility of no trucks.
Possibility of what?
No trucks?
Yeah.
I mean, I use it during the day, so I don't know what happens at 2 in the morning if the trucks are crossing over it, but I don't see any trucks.
So are you saying the city may enact some laws to limit
No food truck.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so talking about the alternative A versus alternative B, if we're gonna have a bridge that lasts for 60 to 100 years, I would, really, really want to consider constricting the vehicle traffic to 1 lane. And I know that, like, Caleb, you're discussing, oh, well, we have to decide what to do with the striping or whatever. And I think part of that is that yes, a lot of the like putting bollards in or whatever can be done afterwards. But if we don't have the plan or the promise to do that, then I don't think it's not worth the money to me to do something that would have a bridge for 60 to 100 years. I'd rather just do the fix for 15 years and hope that we have better plans in place in that time when it needs to be replaced. Because I just don't want to lock us into a 60 to 100 year plan with no access for pedestrians or cyclists.
I would second that as well. Just, I don't see the point of investing in something if the return on investment will be something we don't even want or that we don't benefit from in those 20 years from now. We've seen how much change has happened in the past even 5 years, 10 years. So to not consider this, I know that it might feel to you like we're getting ahead of the game by talking about all of this tonight, but we have to be thinking about how are people going to be using this bridge, and that determines whether or not we think it's worthwhile as an investment as a community. So
yeah,
I just want to second that point.
I have a friend who lives on Front Street, and she really wants to bike to work in the mill yard or walk to work because she lives so close and she can't. She feels unsafe. And if that change was made, that might indicate if she wanted to stay in the city as a young professional or leave and go to Boston or something like that. And I want to see her stay because I like her. So, I just don't see how 2 lanes over the river helps with traffic. I think the things that make the traffic bad, from my experience going over the bridge, is the intersections. Those seem to be the places where people are getting stuck, moving, changing lanes, coming off of the exit 6, trying to get into the left. Like, if I got off of exit 6 and I didn't have to change lanes to turn left, then it would be a lot smoother trip. So I just don't see those 2 lanes helping with the traffic much.
I'd like to add that my neighbor left the city because she could not traverse this bridge in the winter.
So I just looked at just quickly at the 2022 DOT counts for Amoskeag Bridge, and it's actually, you had what, 16,000?
12.
Yeah, so 2022 was 12,800. 2022, so again, the numbers are still staying fairly consistent to what we had.
Okay, I think with that, we'll wrap up this part of it. I really appreciate everyone coming out. I think we definitely heard a common theme through all this, for sure. So we'll take this back. We'll talk with the city. We're going to stay here if people want to come up and talk, more specifics. But I do appreciate everybody's time tonight. I know it was kind of a little rough night out, but not too bad, right?
Appreciate you guys.
So the 80%, has that been committed? Is that a number, or do we have to apply for that?
No, it's committed. Well, it's committed. Once we come up with construction, I mean, we have it through design at this point in time, and then we can see, like Sean had mentioned, that nowadays with construction costs, who knows? The city does have, thankfully, we've got a number of directed monies from SB 402 as well as HB 2 in the last couple of years, where we've done additional bridge money. So the city, to some degree, has the match already for eastbound bridge at this point, and the city has in their 10-year plan committed the funding for developing that number. It's a 10-year plan, but again, let's see what the bids come in at, and if it's higher than the bid that's committed, see if they have those funds available.
Well, if you go to union, I can keep those prices up.